Okay, good morning, students. We'll now continue with our lecture 9 under module 5, and 2 more lectures are left over to complete our syllabus. So keep track with me. In the previous session, we have written unit test by using MR unit, which has to be used in association with J unit, right? MR unit and J unit has to be used together in order to write the map reduce tests. Map and reducer tests are written by using map driver and reduce driver, and they are packed into a job, and for testing the job we have written max temperature driver in order to test the entire job. And finally, we have seen how to run locally on test data by running a job in local job runner and testing the driver. In today's lecture, we are going to see how to run it on a cluster by packaging a job and launching it, and how to understand the map reduce web user interface. Map reduce web user interface is very appealing. It is self-explanatory. The monitoring of the map and reduce jobs can very well be monitored by using this map reduce web UI. It will be very interesting for you to go through that topic. Now let us start with running on a cluster, running a MapReduce job on a cluster by packaging the job. Now that we are happy with the program running on a small test data set, which we have tested on our local machine, running in a pseudo distributed mode, now we are ready to try it on the full data set on a Hadoop cluster, right? We are going to now run this job, which is working fine without any errors, on a full data set on larger cluster, on Hadoop cluster. Now the local job runner uses a single JVM to run a job. So as long as all the classes that our job needs are on its class path, then things will just work fine, right? If at all the classes that our job needs are on the same class path as the job, right, then all the things will work fine without any exceptions. Now in a distributed setting, but once you get this job onto a cluster in a distributed context, things are a little more complex. Things start getting complex. For a start, a jobs classes must be packaged into a job jar file to send to the cluster, right? What classes you have in a job? You have mapper class, reducer class, and max temperature class, which packs the entire job. Now that job has to be packed into a job jar file, into a job Java archive file, in order to transport it, in order to send it onto a cluster, so that it can be picked up by the task trackers once the task is scheduled by the job tracker, in order to execute the processing task, right? So you have to convert a job into a jar file. That is very much essential to send your job from your local machine onto a cluster. Now Hadoop will find the job jar automatically by searching for the jar on the driver's class path that contains the class set in the set jar by class method. So this Hadoop will find this Java archive file automatically by searching for the jar on the driver's class path. Okay, on the driver's class path, it searches for the jar file that contains the class set in the set jar by class method. By using set jar by class method, we can set the class which can be used by the Java archive file, and this can be set either on a job configuration object or on a job object, right? So alternatively, if you want to set an explicit jar file by its file path, you can use the set jar method. So if you want separately, if you want explicitly to set a jar file, that can be done by simply calling a set jar method. If not, if you want to set it by the class path, then you can use set jar by class method. Okay, there are two methods. Only for Java archive file, if you want to set, you can use set jar. If you want to set it for a class, then you can use set jar by class. Now, creating a job jar file is conveniently achieved by using a build tool such as Ant or Maven. So you already learned about this Maven build automation tool, right? So in the same way, you have another automation tool, that is Ant, which can be used in order to conveniently create a job jar file, jobs Java archive file. Now, the following Maven command, for example, will create a jar file called Hadoop examples.jar in the project directory containing all the compiled classes. So what all the compiled classes you have? Mapper class, reducer class, and the main class that packed the job. Now all these three classes, in order to create a jar file, you have to use Hadoop examples.jar in the project directory, which already contains mapper class, reducer class, and job class files, right? For that, you have to use percentage Maven, which indicates the Maven command, percentage Maven package, what you're packaging, all the tests, all the skip tests. Sorry, if you want to, I'm really sorry, if you want to skip the tests that are written for mapper and reducer and directly test it on a cluster. In such cases, in order to take the skipping a higher priority than the existing commands, you have to give -d, skip the tests. So all the tests will be skipped and the jar file will be created. Remember, tests are written to check your code at a local machine, right? In a pseudo distributed mode. You're testing it on your local machine, on your local file in a pseudo distributed mode. And you don't want those tests to be carried on to your Hadoop cluster. That is why you're using Maven while packaging the job. Skip all the tests, skip all the unit tests that are written to check your code at a smaller scale, right? Now, if you have a single job per jar, you have to use Sorry for the interruption. I'll share the screen. Yeah, we are here, right? So this is the command in order to skip the test and package the job and run it, put it onto a Hadoop cluster. Now, if you have a single job per jar, you can specify the main class to run in the jar files manifest file. You know what is a manifest file, right? All the configurations will be defined. Now, if you have only a single job per one Java archive file, remember you can pack multiple jobs also into a Java archive file. Now, if you have only a single job in your Java archive file, then you can specify the main class to run in the jar files manifest file itself. Now, if the main class is not in the manifest, it must be specified on the command line. Okay, if the main file is not available in the Java's manifest file, then it must be specified on the command line directly. Now, any dependent jar files can be packaged in a library subdirectory in the job jar file. So, if you have any dependent Java archive files, if there are any dependencies in order to run the job that is developed in a Maven environment or in an Ant environment, then those dependencies have to be packaged in a library subdirectory in the job jar file. So if you have a jar file main.jar file, in that you have to create a subdirectory with lib in order to add any dependencies for the jar file. Similarly, any resource files can be packaged in a classes subdirectory. So if you have any resource files in which the configuration properties are added, in such case, those can be added in another subdirectory with classes as another subdirectory with the name classes, and all those resource files can be added under that subdirectory classes, right? So the Java archive file now will have two subdirectories: library, which contains the dependent jar files, and classes, which contains the resource files. Now the user's client-side class path set by Hadoop jar is made up of what all components? It contains the job jar file and any jar files in the lib directory of the jar file and classes directory, as I have shown you the hierarchy. Okay, it contains the main job jar file and it contains the lib directory which has the jar files dependencies, and class directory which has the resource files that can be added to that job, right? For every job it has some dependencies, and also it requires some configuration details. What are the properties that are set for the job with respect to the system, right? So all these are required in order to execute a job. So for job, you should have a Java archive file, a library directory which contains all the jar files dependencies, and classes subdirectory to contain all the resource files for required configuration details. Okay, this explains why you have to set Hadoop class path to point to dependent classes and libraries if you're running using the local job runner without a job jar. Now, when you're running it in a local job runner on a single machine in a pseudo distributed mode, you need not have this Java archive file. You can directly run it from the class file itself. You can directly run it from Java class file itself. But when you're transporting it onto a cluster, only then you're creating this Java archive file along with its subdirectories, library, and classes, which contains the dependencies and which contains the source resource files that has the configuration details, right? Now on a cluster, when you're creating the task path, class path, on a cluster, map and reduce tasks run in separate JVMs and their class paths are not controlled by Hadoop class path. So when you are transporting your job onto a cluster, map and reduce task doesn't run on the same Java virtual machine. They run on two different Java virtual machines and their class paths are no longer controlled by Hadoop class path. Hadoop class path is a client-side setting. That is why it doesn't have any control on the cluster side. Understand this carefully. Hadoop class path is a client-side setting, so you can't have any control on the MapReduce jobs running on a cluster. So Hadoop class path is a client-side setting and only sets the class path for the driver JVM which submits the job. After the job is submitted, it doesn't have any control on it. Now, instead, the user's task class path is comprised of the following. Now, if you come to the concept of user's class path, then it is comprised of what components? Let us see. It contains a job jar file. Any jar file contained in the library directory of the job jar file and the classes directory. Means it contains all the dependencies and all the resource files. And in addition to that, any files added to the distributed cache using the lib jars option or the add file to class path method on job. Now, if you have any files added to the distributed cache, this distributed cache is a component which helps us to reduce the transfer of jar files between one system to another system. So when you have repeatedly executing jobs, those jobs jar files can be cached so that they need not be created again and again. The jar files for that job need not be created again and again. They can be temporarily cached so that they can quickly be invoked when the job has to be executed for the second time or third time repeatedly. Right? So that kind of files, any files added to the distributed cache using the option -lib jars, library jars, which contains the Java archive files in a library, right? That option can be used, or the add file to class path method on the job. Okay, these three components will be held by the user's task class path. Now, given these different ways of controlling what is on the client and task class paths, on the client side, you don't have this extra distributed cache. But on the task class path, you have this additional distributed cache in order to make it more efficient to repeatedly execute a job using a Java archive file. There are corresponding options for including library dependencies for a job. What are those? Unpack the libraries and repackage them in the job Java archive file and package the libraries in the library directory of the job jar file and keep the libraries separate from the job jar and add them to the client class path via Hadoop class path and to the task class path via lib jars. These are various ways of packaging your jar file. What are these various ways? You create a Java archive file, you create the subdirectories, lib and classes in order to add the dependencies and in order to add the resource files, and you also have an option to add the class paths for the distributed cache by using -lib jars method. These are various ways of controlling what is on the client and task class paths in order to run your job. Now, the last option, using the distributed cache, that is this last option, using the distributed cache is simplest from a build point of view because dependencies don't need rebundling in the job jar. Once a Java archive file is created, if at all it is stored in a distributed cache, then it is not required to repeatedly rebundle all the classes into Java archive file each time a job is called. Understood? Job which is already packed into a jar file and available in the cache can be used to repeatedly execute the job. rather than rebundling each time all the class files into the job and start executing it. Okay, you're temporarily storing it in a cache and executing it again and again. The same jar file is being used again and again whenever the job needs to be executed. Now, also the distributed cache can mean fewer transfers. That is what I said. It can mean fewer transfers of jar files around the cluster since files may be cached on a node between the tasks. Between one task to another task, if you store these Java archive files on a distributed cache, it will be easy to set up the job and start executing it immediately whenever it is required. You need not start the entire task of packing the job from the beginning again. All the jar files along with their dependencies, along with their resource files are stored in a distributed cache so that quickly they can be collected and transported onto various nodes to execute the job. Now, user jar files are added to the end of both the client class path and the task class path, which in some cases can cause a dependency conflict with Hadoop's built-in libraries if Hadoop uses a different incompatible version of a library that your code uses. So when you are using these jar files repeatedly, it may raise some incompatibility issues if Hadoop uses a different or incompatible version of a library that your code uses. Sometimes you need to be able to control the task class path in order so that your classes are picked up first. So in such cases, how to resolve that? Now, if your jar files class paths are not compatible enough to work with Hadoop running in a different version, how to solve that? You should be able to override the task class paths from the command line argument. How can you do that? On the client side, you can force Hadoop to put the user class path first in the search order by setting the Hadoop user class path first environment variable to true. Now, by setting this environment variable Hadoop user class path first, you can make the user pass his class path which is compatible enough with Hadoop's built-in libraries for that particular execution of the job. Right? You're giving priority to the user entered class paths through command line argument. For the task class path, you can set map reduce task class path first to true. If you want user class path, you can take it as Hadoop user class path first and make it as true. And if you want task class path to be set by the user, then you can take map reduce dot task dot class path dot first to be set to true. Now note that by setting these options, you change the class loading for Hadoop framework dependencies, which could potentially cause the job submission or task to fail. So use these options with caution. Whenever you are using these options, you should be highly cautious because these may sometimes conflict with the jar's dependencies and errors or exceptions may be thrown. So when you are using these client user side class paths to be set, you should use them with good discretion. You should use them cautiously so that they don't throw any exceptions. They should be used only in rare conditions, okay, so that they don't have any conflicts with the Hadoop's built-in libraries. Now, in order to launch the job, we need to run the driver specifying the cluster that we want to run the job on with configuration option. So in order to launch a job, in order to make the job start its execution, once the Java archive file is sent onto the cluster, you have to launch the job. Now to launch the job, we need to run the driver specifying the cluster that we want to run the job on. We can specify on which cluster you prefer to run the job with the configuration option, -conf option. For that, first you have to unset the Hadoop class path. If any previous class paths are set, they have to be unset. Then the Hadoop command for invoking this job can be given. For that, you are using Hadoop jar file, that is Hadoop examples.jar, which takes the max temperature driver, which has the job packed into it, along with the configurations using Hadoop cluster.xml, any configuration details that have to be set for the cluster, they'll be available on Hadoop cluster.xml. So you have to pass that Hadoop cluster.xml along with the file from which the data has to be read to process the data by using map and reduce functions. So what is the input file we are using here? Input NCDC data all max temp file, which contains the raw details that can be converted to key value pairs to be input to the map phase, which further gives input to the reduce phase, and reduce phase gives your consolidated result. Right? For that, this is the command to execute the job. Now, the wait for completion method on job launches. Once you execute this command, once you call this input file and the max temperature driver class, which works on that input, this further calls wait for completion method. You know, this is used in the main function in max temperature driver, right? It is called by using the main function. Now, wait for completion method on this job object launches the job and polls for progress. It keeps indicating its progress, writing a line summarizing the map and reduces progress whenever either changes. Means whenever a map task proceeds or whenever a reduce task progresses, all that will be eventually written to the job to show what is the progress of the task, to show how the map jobs and reduce jobs are progressing with the execution. Right? I'll show you how that is seen by using a web UI. Now, Hadoop comes with a web UI for viewing information about your jobs. If you want to know the progress of your MapReduce jobs, remember MapReduce jobs process voluminous data. It processes large amounts of data. So it takes long time to process or execute a particular job. Now, a client will feel it more comfortable if he is able to monitor the progress of the MapReduce task rather than he being completely alienated from the execution task. If he is completely not aware of what is happening with the MapReduce job, then he may not have the experience of working with the cluster. So the monitoring of this MapReduce job, if it is shown to the client in a user-friendly way, then he can experience the process of execution of this MapReduce job. So Hadoop comes with a web user interface for viewing information about your jobs. It is useful for following a job's progress while it is running, as well as finding job statistics and logs after the job has completed. Now, after one job is completed, if you want to know how many map jobs executed on the job, how many reduced tasks executed, how much of input is consumed, how many input splits are given to the map phase, and how much of data is consumed by the reduced phase, and what is the final output, to which file it is written, all these job statistics and logs will be available on this web user interface in order to know about the progress or execution of your job. Now you can find the user interface at this URL. When you are executing your MapReduce job, if you type this URL in your web browser by using this port number, it will open the MapReduce web user interface for you. And that user interface looks like this. This is the page for the job tracker. This is the page which displays details about the job, and this is displayed by the job tracker. Okay, now I'll explain each of these contents so that you will understand how to monitor your MapReduce job. Now see the first line. It explains the state of the job. The first line will give you the state of the job. In this case, the state is still running. The job is still running. And second line gives you when this job has started. The date and the time will be given when this job has started its execution. And the version of Hadoop is also printed here. And the fourth line indicates when it is compiled, when this job is compiled. Again, the date and time is given, and the identifier for this job is given. Hadoop provided identifier for this job is given in the fifth line. Now, it also gives in the second segment of this page, it gives the cluster summary. Now, what does this cluster summary tell us? What details that does this cluster summary provide us? It tells us how many map jobs are running, number of maps, number of reduces, and total submissions made to this cluster. On this cluster, you can notice that 2 jobs are running. Okay, total submissions made to this cluster are 2 jobs. Okay, and number of map jobs and number of reduced jobs, and how many nodes are running on this cluster. It indicates that 11 nodes are running on this cluster. And map task capacity. What is the map task capacity? Every node has some capacity to run the map jobs. Here, the map task capacity is 88 and the reduced task capacity is also 88. On this particular cluster, it has maximum capacity of 88 map tasks to be run and 88 reduced tasks to be run. And average tasks per node that can be assigned are 16 in this cluster. And you can see the last column. If there are any blacklisted nodes while executing this job, if at all a data node failed, if at all a system failed, in such cases that node will be blacklisted so that it will not be requested to perform any map or reduce task until it is made healthy again. Right? So in this case, there are no blacklisted nodes. Means there is no malfunction in any of the data nodes during the execution of this job. In the next segment, you have the scheduling information. Here it is not applicable. And next phase, next segment, you can see the running jobs details. In this case, this is the running job. And the next segment gives you the completed jobs details. Right? In this running job, you can find the job ID and what is the priority given to that job. You can assign jobs some priority. If it is given high priority, then the executing normal jobs will be preempted for some time and high priority jobs will be executed. Right? So here in this case, the job is not having any high priority. It is just given a normal priority. And the user, who is the user that owns this job? To which directory it belongs to. Now here it belongs to the root directory. And what is the name of the job? You can see here in the max temperature Java class, you have given the job a name max temperature. Do you remember? That name will appear here, max temperature. While you're packing the job, you have created a name. While you're packing the job object, you're passing a name for the job as parameter. Do you remember? That name will appear here. This name will help us to identify the job when multiple jobs are running on a cluster. Now you can see the percentage of map tasks that are completed and the reduced tasks that are completed, percentage of reduced tasks that are completed. How this percentage is calculated? You can see the total number of map tasks and the map tasks completed. So 48 map tasks out of 101 map tasks completed execution. So the percentage of map tasks completed is 47.52%. And you can see here reduced tasks. Total reduced tasks are 30 and number of reduced tasks still they haven't reported to this user interface. That is why the reduced task completed is very minimal here. Okay, it may be around 1 or 2 reduced tasks completed, but still it is not reflecting in this user interface. So just it is giving the minimal amount of reduced task percentage that is completed. Again, job scheduling information, it is not applicable here. Now you can see the completed jobs information. This job ID, whose name is word count, this job is already completed and its priority is normal and it belongs to this root directory, and number of map tasks, total map tasks are 14 and all the 14 map tasks are completed. So you can see the status as 100% map tasks completed. Again, you can see number of reduced tasks 30, reduced tasks completed are 30, and you can see that all 100% reduced tasks are completed. Okay, this is for a completed job. That is why you can see all the map and reduced tasks completely executed, right? And if you have any failed jobs, if any jobs failed in the middle due to some exceptions, in such case that information will be available under failed jobs. In this case, there are only 2 jobs running on a cluster. One of them is completed and one of them is still running. There are no failed jobs. So it is giving us none. Now under this local logs, you have local directory and job tracker history. Now this job tracker history, listen carefully, this job tracker history at a time can display 100 jobs information. Job tracker history on this web user interface displays 100 jobs details at a time. Okay, and this log directory will have all the completed jobs details along with the map jobs and reduced jobs, along with how many bytes they have consumed and how many bytes they have emitted. All that information will be available with the log directory in order to see in what way your map job has executed, into how many map jobs your job has been split, and how many reduced jobs have executed. All that information will be available in your log directory. Now, when you click on this link, on this job ID, when you click on this job ID, then that corresponding job page will be opened on the web user interface. When you click on this job ID, did you notice this? When you click on this job ID, that corresponding job page will be opened. This also gives you the user directory to which this job belongs to, and the job name. Here the job name is max temperature, and the job file. This job file will contain all the details about your map reduced task and the job setup, whether the job has been set up successfully or not, and the status of the job. If it is still running, it will give running. If it is completed, the status will be updated to completed, and when this job has started and for how much duration it is running for, and the job cleanup, whether it is pending or whether it is whether it has completed, that will be displayed. Now, before going to this page, let me show you what details will be displayed when you launch a job. Now, when you launch a job and execute this command, this in turn calls wait for completion method, right? Now, when you are going, when this job is being executed and when this method is launched on job, then it polls for the progress, means it keeps giving its progress to the user interface, writing a line summarizing the map and reduces progress whenever either changes. Remember, in the web user interface, what I have shown you, and on the screen, if at all you want to know the progress, that progress will be updated at frequent intervals of time as and when there is a progress in the map and reduce jobs. Now you can see you can see these details that are provided by the job. Let me orient you on these figures so that you will understand when you come across this, which will be displayed when a job is being executed. In this case, you can see here map reduce file input format. In this, total input paths to the process. How many input paths are given? Your entire NCDC data set is zipped into 101 zipped files, and each file is given as an input split to your map reduce job. Okay, so there are how many input paths here? Total 101 input paths, 101 zipped files from which the data is read. Okay, so now you can see here initially there are 0% map jobs and 0% reduced jobs. Still, the map and reduced jobs are not resumed. Still, it is in the process of reading the data from these 101 zipped files. Okay, so initially the map reduces job client status. It is shown as map 0% and reduce also 0%. Now the map execution has started, showing that the map progress is 28%. You can also notice that reduced progress is 0%. You know the reason for this. Unless map jobs are executed up to some extent and start giving output, and which is given as input to the reduce phase can't start executing. That is why it is given as 0%. Okay, now map progress is 30%. Then reduce hasn't started still. Maybe after map job executed up to some 80% or 70%, then reduce job may resume execution because some of the output from map task is available as input to the reduce task. Now after some time, after some duration, you can notice that map job executed 100% and even reduced jobs also executed up to 100%. And the job with this job identifier has been completed. You can see the job identifier here, running which job with this job identifier, and which job is completed, the same job with the same identifier has been completed. Now listen carefully. This job will give the information about 19 counters. Students, you need not write this for your exam. Again, this is for your understanding sake. All the in your lecture notes, all the content that is shaded with this gray color, it is for your understanding. Okay, so you need not remember as it is for the exam. Just understand what kind of information will be displayed by your job windows. Now here it displays details about 19 counters. What are those details? What are the number of reduced tasks that are launched? What are the number of map tasks that are launched? All this information will be given. And understand this carefully again. You have rack local map tasks as 82 and data local map tasks as 45. What do you mean by this? Rack local map tasks indicate that if a data node is busy with the map jobs where the data is residing, then that map task have to be scheduled onto another data node in the same rack. Right? That is called as rack local map task. But if you have a data node free to execute the map task on which the data resides, then it is called as data local map task. So you can see here that data local map tasks are 45 and rack local map tasks which required some transfer of data, such kind of map tasks are 82 here. Okay, and number of map tasks 127, number of reduced tasks 32. you know the reason for this also. Map tasks process more amount of data, and reduced tasks work on reduced amount of data. That is why the number of reduced tasks are lesser here. Okay. Now you can also see the file system counters, number of file bytes read from the NCDC dataset, and number of HDFS bytes read onto a cluster, and file bytes that are written, that is the result that is written, HDFS bytes that are written, and map reduced framework counters also are available. What are those map reduced framework counters? Reduce input groups, combine output records, how many output records are combined, intermediate to the map and reduce phase, that combine output records, map input records, reduce shuffle bytes, how many bytes are shuffled by the reduce phase, how many bytes are shuffled before giving it as input to the reduce phase. That details are given, reduce output records are given, spilled records are given. These spilled records are extra records that can't be accommodated on a map task and transported onto the next map task. Spilled records details are given, map output bytes are given, map input bytes are given. They will not be given in an order, but finally you will get all the details. Okay, actually it should give first map input bytes, then map output bytes, but they don't have any such sorting. It just displays all the counter details. Now it gives combine input records details, map output records details, and finally reduce input records details. Right? All these are the counters information. These are the job counters that will be displayed in your job page. Okay, these are the details that will be available to the user when a job is launched. Now the output includes more useful information here. Before the job starts, its ID is printed. We have seen that this is needed whenever you want to refer to the job in the log files. Why do you need an job ID? Log files contain details about multiple jobs. So if you want to locate your job ID is very much required. If you want to locate your job in the log file, in order to see all these details, you must have this job identifier. Now, for example, when interrogating it via the Hadoop job command, yes, if you give this Hadoop job command and you want to interrogate about your particular job, then job identifiers are very much necessary. Now, when the job is complete, its statistics are printed out. That is the counters. The counters related to the data that is consumed by each phase. The statistics that are related to the number of bytes that are combined by the map phase and the reduce phase will be displayed by counters. Now, these are very useful for confirming that the job did what you expected, right? Because jobs are being executed at a larger scale, if you are able to monitor how much of input is consumed, how much of output is emitted, if you are able to have a view of all that, if you are able to monitor it, then it will give you a confidence that it has executed according to your expectations. Now, for example, for this job, we can see that 275 GB of input data was analyzed. You can see here, I'm highlighting here, map input bytes. Map input bytes total 275 GB of data is analyzed. Read from around 34 GB of compressed files on HDFS, which is indicated by HDFS bytes read. Okay, so this map input is read from 335 GB's data, that is read as HDFS bytes. Okay, that is mentioned in the counters. Now the input was broken into 101 zipped files of reasonable size, so there was no problem with not being able to split them. You can see here the input. Here you can see the first line I'm highlighting here. You can see the total input paths to be processed. They are split into 101 zipped files. They are the work units or input splits that will be assigned to the data nodes in order to perform the map task and further the reduce task. Right? This is how you need to understand the details that are displayed in a job page. Now let us go back to our job page. This is the last slide. Just bear with me. I'll complete the class. This is the job page which gives us details about all this information. I have given you, I have explained this already to you, and it also tells us about the map job and the reduce job. Here, how many tasks are completed for the map phase and how many tasks are completed for the reduce phase. They are being displayed. Here 101 map tasks and all map tasks have been completed, so it gives the status as 100% completed. But among the reduce phase, still among these 38 jobs, among this, some 38 jobs, 33 jobs have been, 33 are still running. Okay, that is why it is given as only 75% has been completed. And here you can see how many number of map tasks have been completed. All 101 out of 101 tasks have been completed, and 17 reduced jobs have been completed. Based on that, this percentage of completed tasks is calculated. And you can see here failed tasks failed task details are given. If there are any failed map tasks or any failed reduced tasks, that details are displayed here. Fortunately, here there are no failed map tasks or reduced tasks. And also you can see here the job counter details, the file system counter details, the map reduced framework details. I have shown this in your notes, what I have shown in the gray color. All these details are present there, right? That is just to make you understand what all information are displayed in the job page. Now see this last part of this job page. This job page has the details about the map tasks that are executing in a graph model and the reduced tasks that are executing. Now this displays all the map jobs are completed, and here reduced jobs are still running. In this case, this green graph indicates the copy job and red indicates the sorting job and blue indicates the reduce job. What is the copy job? In this reduce phase, all the map task outputs have to be copied onto the reduce task. So what is the progress of that copy? That is displayed in the green color. And if you want to sort the output that is given by the map phase, that map phase sort status is given here, and how many of the reduced tasks have completed execution, that is given in the blue color, right? So that's all with this web user interface to track the progress of a job in terms of map and reduce tasks. In coming up session, we are going to deal with retrieving the results, debugging a job, and how to go through the Hadoop logs for getting the details about the job execution and how to perform remote debugging. Students, are you able to stay tuned with me? Are you understanding the concept? If you have any doubt in these concepts, you can WhatsApp your doubts to me and I'll explain those in the next class. In 2 more classes, we'll complete our syllabus, and after that, 2 classes will be left for us, in which I'll try to complete the VAC also. Okay? By this next weekend, we'll be able to complete our syllabus as well as VAC content. Okay, meet you in the next class.